Hey, y'all. I'm Elizabeth K. Wine, founder and executive director of Music Export Memphis. We are back at the beautiful Memphis Listening Lab for another episode of Export 101 with Rachel Maxann.
Hello, hello.
Welcome. So before we just go deep, let's just kick off with, you're a singer, you're a songwriter, you're a Renaissance woman. Give us the overview of you as an artist, and let's kick it off with, like, where can people find you?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Easiest probably rachelmaxann.com. I'm on, all the platforms like Facebook and, Instagram and Spotify and all that jazz.
I know how I would describe you from like a genre perspective, but how would you describe yourself? How would you describe your music?
Recently I've picked up the term Goth Folk.
Okay.
Yes. I did postmodern folk for a long time, and I really like that name. But, recently I've been, especially with my new album, Black Fae, being out, I'm like, a lot of my songs tend to be a little more gothy. Mm-hmm. I was a goth teenager, and I think some of those roots are starting to come up again with the song content and just like my general style. I like fairies and just like very like dark, like realms kind of thing. So Black Folk is what I'm kind of goth Black Folk is what I'm going for.
I love it. We love a hyphenate. That's fantastic. So, okay. So, Export 101, this is all about kind of demystifying this whole process of building a touring career. And so that's really what we're going to dig into today. And I like to kick it off with everybody just talking about your very first tour. Tell me about the first time you went on the road and spare no detail.
Okay. So the first time I went on the road as a solo artist, because I have gone with different bands in the past, my first time as a solo artist, I actually had help from my friend from Cincinnati. He was just kind of starting up a little tour agency, and one of the places that I really wanted to go was Memphis. That's actually how I ended up like living here. So you never know what happens when you go on tour. You might find your new home. But I was so excited, and I just did like a little southern tour. Hit up like Nashville, Memphis, Atlanta, places like that. It was really exciting. I brought it was just like really just me and my guitar on the road. And it was exciting. It was nerve-wracking at some times. Mm-hmm. But in the long run, it was an overall positive experience. And I'm so glad it was. Yeah. Because, it really set the tone of like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can just go out on my own. Because, like I said, it was my first time. Otherwise, it was with bands of like 6 or 7 people plus, So... yeah, it was good to be able to do it out on my own.
Did you book that tour yourself?
I did partially. Okay. Like I said, my friend kind of helped out with a lot of it. But then I did some kind of in-between gigs. Like he kind of did the bigger venues, but I was like finding like little small things I could sneak myself into, or like radio stations, stuff like that. Like, so it was a joint effort. It was a joint effort.
Yeah. What do you feel like? I mean, it feels from your tone that like you look back on it with love, like you look back on it positively. Yeah. But I'm sure it was also tough, like being out on the road on your own. What do you feel like were some of the lessons that you took away from that first outing that you were still carrying with you?
Definitely as far as spacing out the venues, because it didn't really click that I knew I'd be driving alone, but then I was like, I didn't realize how tired I would be driving alone. Like, you don't have that switch off. So it's like, some of the venues were quite far away from each other after like a long gig. And I was just like running on fumes. So I'm like, okay. So for all like future tours that I ended up booking, I made sure there was like adequate time for like, taking a day off sometimes. Like, it's okay to have a day off if you're driving like 8-10 hours one day doing a gig.
Yeah.
Take a day off. It is okay. It is good.
Yeah. So that routing is so critical. So like, what's your kind of max now when you're looking at the route? Like, what's the max number of hours that you'll drive in a day?
If I am by myself, my max is actually 7.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's too many.
It's still a lot, but before it was like 10. So like, but I'm a Midwesterner, so we tend to just drive.
You're used to driving.
Yeah, we're big drivers. We're like, why take a plane ride when you can just drive 14 hours?
Yeah.
So yeah, my max has definitely gone down since then. But yeah, before it was probably too much. I overestimated how much I could do while performing at my like greatest.
Doing something that is naturally taking so much out of you, and then not just physically, but like mentally and emotionally exhausting as well. Yeah, that's really challenging. Well, and kind of on that same idea of like the mental and emotional aspects of this, thinking about going from touring with bands and with other folks, and also not, I'm assuming not your name, on the bill. Like, what was that like to take that step and be not just by yourself, but by yourself on stage? Like, your name is on the marquee or on the poster or whatever. How did that feel to do that for the first time?
Really, really good.
Yeah.
But also there, of course, is an intimidation factor.
Oh my gosh,
no, now it's all on me. Like, it's like, if I mess up, if I'm late, if like I'm not getting paid correctly, like I have to take care of that.
Yeah.
So it was a big responsibility, like making that switch, but it's worth it because then you do also get all the praise. You get, a good chunk of the money. There are a lot of benefits to that as well.
Yeah.
So it was a big switch, but it was a really good switch, and I'm glad I did it. And these days I'm a little, more leaning into like having people with me. Like I like having a duo situation, trio, sometimes more of a band. Like I can do solo stuff, and I still do. But these days, like I feel like the older I get, I'm like, I don't want to go alone. I'm like, I don't want to have someone to split the drive with me.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning more toward that. But it's important.
There's obviously like logistical benefits to that, like you were just saying, like having someone to split the drive with. But do you find too that you want to prioritize, presenting your sound in a different way? Like, is that a piece of it? Because I know, there's plenty of artists who have that ability, just as you do, to sort of do the solo thing or go out with a full band. But we've talked with actually folks on this podcast about how much they prioritize having a band because of what it means for how they present their music.
Right.
What's that decision making like for you?
It kind of depends on like, the tour I want to do and where I want to go.
Yeah.
Because I know some places are going to be looking more for bands, or if I'm going for a route that's like more festivals, but if I'm planning on a small tour where I'm thinking like more listening rooms, more like, like kind of not necessarily having to be as loud to get everyone's attention.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, no, this I can just kind of show my raw form, just show like me and my guitar. But, there's benefits and downsides to both. So it really depends on what kind of tour I want to do. And, even the single or album I'm promoting that year.
Yeah.
Like this last album, it has more band elements. It has more like violin and cello to it. So if I'm wanting to like promote that album, then I'm going to want to bring a band because it's like, well, that is more representative of that album when I'm showing it.
Yeah. And I think that's important, right? Like, so a conversation I've had with artists a lot, that if you put this product out that is this beautiful full band sound and you don't have the capacity at all to tour in that way, or even a derivative of that, it's really tough because your fans are not necessarily getting live what they're getting on the record and vice versa.
Exactly.
And that can be a real disconnect. Well, so, okay, first tour and then fast forwarding to now, you said you had some help on that first outing. What does that booking process look like for you now? Are you primarily doing this on your own, or do you still have, folks that are supporting you on it? And how are you thinking about routes now at this point in your career?
Right. Yes. I'm definitely a lot more calculated than I used to be. Because from the first tour, it was more like, where do I want to go? Like, what would be fun for me? But since then, I've gone on quite a few more tours since then, and my music has reached a different, a wider audience. So now I'm kind of, looking at those stats. I'm looking at like, okay, well, here's going to be more of an audience for me, and kind of prioritizing those places, while also considering like, oh, I really want to go to like, wherever this year. Thinking about seeing if that can work in. But, now I have a manager. I work with a booking agency sometimes. I do a little bit of both. Like sometimes I book my own stuff. And then sometimes if I'm planning on going out for a long run, I'll be like, hey, reach out to your contacts here and there, see what we can get from you.
Yeah.
So I still do both because I actually find a lot of joy in booking my own tours as well.
Really?
I know.
Okay, fascinating.
Yeah.
Is it just that you are like, that it sort of scratches like an organizational itch or something? Like, what about it do you love?
I think so. I think it's because, I like connecting to the venues directly, and just knowing that they for sure know who I am and what I am going to play and what I'm about. So there's not that like question of like, oh, I wonder what the booking agency, like I trust them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there is nothing like having the steering wheel and just being like, yep, I did this. I'm going to go where I want to go and, just kind of iron out the details. I do enjoy making the details, booking my own Airbnb sometimes, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's fun.
And, something that I've always felt is that when you do it yourself, you also have a different perspective than when it comes to hiring someone to do it for you or having a teammate, because you know what good looks like. And you also know how hard it is to do the job. So there's a level of respect that comes along with it. I mean, do you feel like that has been true for you, that like having that experience booking yourself has meant that you maybe are, looking for something specific when it comes to a booking relationship with a booker? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like, having that previous conversation with them before I even have like entered into the venue, like I said, there's already a little bit of a relationship because, sure, a lot of venues have bookers, but more often than not, it is an overworked bartender.
Right.
Like even with some of the big ones, it's still just an overworked bartender that's answering all these emails. And, and instead of just the typical like, oh, booking agency, whatever, it's like, hi, I'm Rachel. I'm actually the artist talking to you.
I'm a human person.
I'm a human person talking to you right now. And I get a lot of good responses from that. Like there's something very personal about it because I've always felt that, service industry and musicians, we're like,
oh, yeah,
two peas in a pod. Like, absolutely. We're doing the same thing. So it's like, I feel like what I can kind of come to them is like, like, hey, we're two people just like doing this thing because we love it.
Absolutely.
Let's work together.
Yeah, let's make them cool happen.
Yeah.
Well, okay, speaking of making cool things happen, you had a really incredible opportunity, I think it was last year, to open for Valerie June for a few dates, which is so cool. And in a lot of ways, I think for a lot of, emerging artists or early career artists, that feels like a white whale in a way, sort of like, yes, I want to tour, but what I really want is to get opening slots with someone who is, at a different level in their career than me. And we definitely look to that as like, this step that can really be pivotal in helping you get to the next and the next step after that. So talk about how that came about and also how you've made the most of it, like how you've maximized on that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because like I didn't know of Valerie June until I moved to Memphis, and then I just fell in love. Like was just a huge fan. And one of the things that I really wanted to do was I covered a song of hers.
Yeah.
And it, you got like a little attraction. And I, she liked it, and I was like, fast forward, I didn't really think too much of it. And then fast forward a few months later, her booking team reached out to me. It was like, oh, we like your sound. You kind of came on our radar. We feel like you would be a good fit for this. And I just, oh my gosh, I lost my mind. I was just running around screaming in my office. I was like, what? Like the last thing I expected. But, I can't say that will always work. You can't just cover somebody's song and they'll reach out to you. But
sure, but
it could
work.
It could happen, I think sometimes, I would be really honored and appreciate if someone like covered my song and said like, I love you, I love you, I love you. But like, yeah, you should open for me. Like, you're awesome and you love me. So that's
what
do you need?
Yeah. So like, how have you, I think that was like 5 or 6 dates, right? That you did with her. How have you kind of leveraged that or built on it to, just continue to grow? Yeah.
I have come back to those places, not those exact venues, but like,
so smart.
One of those dates was St. Louis. And since then I've been back like 3 or 4 or 5 times now.
Yeah.
And, the first time that I was booking that place, I definitely did slip in the name like, oh, last time I was here. Somebody from LA.
You might know her.
Well,
Yeah.
I might know her, like at this theater, and it did help to kind of name drop a little bit and throw in that I've already performed there. I've already had a good audience, and people would come see me again, and they did.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's good to, one of the best things I learned about touring is like go back to the places.
Yes.
Which just seems so obvious, but like, I get, when I was early in my career, I got excited and I'm like, okay, I like did an East Coast tour. Now I want to go West. And like, that can be great, but it's like, you got to make sure and go back to the places that people are coming and want to see you again and kind of build that audience there and then reach out to another place.
Yeah.
So.
I actually think that's really important advice because I think there's something about it that for some folks can feel counterintuitive because it's like, well, no, I need to go to more cities, right? And have audiences in more places. But it's like, at some point, that's true. Yeah. But what you've got to do is build that loyalty and that fan base in those markets. Mm-hmm. And that can't mean going one time and then never coming back again.
Exactly.
Well, so earlier you talked about when you're looking at routing and you said something that made me think you're looking at data. So like what kind of data about your fan base are you looking at and in sort of when you're thinking about touring?
It's it varies, but there, my two top tools tend to be like Spotify mm-hmm. and like Instagram. Like, they make it really easy to just look at your stats and be like, oh, okay, who's listening where? Mm-hmm. Like those little Spotify raps that come out, it's so easy to just be like, oh, wow, like these cities are like really listening. They're like repeat listeners. They point out like, oh, you were streaming at this place for many days. And it's like, oh, okay, I should go there again. And I have found, especially from this last year, that the places that I repeated more, like go figure, like those were a lot of the places that like the numbers went up as far as they were streaming me. So it's like,
that's so key.
And I will be back.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, I think, that's something that really like we can't overstate the importance of keeping an eye on those type of numbers, especially to your point, like these platforms make it so easy for you to access this type of data. And when you're thinking about where you're going to route yourself for the first time, like it's critical to take a look at that. And then what I love is that you're going back to it and mm-hmm. and sort of tracking like, okay, I played multiple shows in this city and here's what I'm seeing now from the data. Like that's so important.
Exactly.
So I know you have also gotten plugged in like with the greater folk community through Folk Alliance International. Talk about what that experience has been like for you. I'm just thinking, this is a space that is really about artists doing business. And so I feel like it's something that's important to talk about in a space like this because you connect into that conference, into that community, and people are looking to book you for gigs. They're looking to invite you to do their house concert series, whatever it might be. So yeah, just tell us a little bit about kind of like how you got plugged in to Folk Alliance and what you've seen come from it.
Yes. So, Folk Alliance was my first conference and I didn't really know anything about conferences. Like I thought it was just for, I don't know, like producers or like, I don't even know. Like conferences has never really came across my radar. I thought it was all like just go to venues or whatever. But, it was such a magical experience because it opened up my eyes to one, just so many different aspects of the business. Mm-hmm. Like just going to, the conference, not just conferences, but like going to like the classes, going to the talks, the seminars, like It was absolutely like it exploded my brain in the best way. But and I also was able to network and make these really great connections. Mm-hmm. The connections that I still talk to, that I still like think about when I'm thinking about going touring through Kansas City or St. Louis or like really anywhere because people are literally coming from all over the world.
Absolutely,
all over the world, and you can just like keep up with them and like. You never know when you'll be in their city and it's like, oh, hey, like it's me from Folk Alliance. And suddenly, you got, built-in friends, built-in audience, built-in people to play with.
I was going to say, you never know when there's going to be that opportunity for reciprocal gigs, doing a gig with them in your city, in their city. That's so key.
Absolutely. And it was actually, from Folk Alliance, I, got really into the conference world, and I was like, oh, what else this year is happening? And I found CD Baby Conference, and that's actually where I found my manager.
Amazing.
She saw me do a showcase there and was like, you're awesome. And I'm like, thank you. And then we we just started working together, and it's been really great for my career as well. So conferences, don't miss out on them. They're awesome.
Well, and I think this is a good opportunity to kind of plug, obviously this is a Music Export Memphis podcast. We got to talk about all the ways that we've been able to support you, but really, want folks to understand what's available for them as well. Mm-hmm. And I think, did we give you a grant to go to the CD Baby conference?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was an ambassador industry scholarship that you were able to use to go to that conference. So if there's ever like a conference, professional development opportunity that folks are interested in, they can get funds from us for that. But yeah, what else in general, like more broadly, how do you feel like having the support of Music Export Memphis has, elevated your career?
It has changed my life. And I'm not even just saying that, I swear, because I really didn't even realize that I could have a career in folk music. I really didn't know that was possible for me until I hit up Folk Alliance and, saw people who looked like me, which was amazing.
Yes.
And just people from all around the world and making it in folk music. And I'm like, wow, because before that, Valerie June was really one of the only especially, Black female folk artists that I even knew existed. And, learning more about her opened up my world. But yeah, going to Folk Alliance and seeing people really care about folk music and wanting it to succeed. I was like, I didn't know I had this big of a community. And it was so important to know that. Because I just hadn't known about it. And then, from there, now I'm plugged into Black Opry, which has been
so cool.
So cool. It's been so cool. I just talked with Holly the other day, and I was like, I'm going, I can't make this particular gig, but I'm going to Folk Alliance. She's like, oh, that's so cool. We're supporting you all the way. That's amazing. And I'm just like,
that's so cool.
Just feeling so great about it.
The community piece, that's essential.
Yes.
You just, not just for, commiseration or, celebration, but to literally advance your career by working together, collaborating amongst like-minded folks. That's so big. You can't do it on an island.
You really can't. You really can't. And sometimes it feels like that. Again, kind of, growing up in the Midwest, there wasn't Black folk musicians. There's just no one around me. And, in Memphis, there's a little bit more, but even then not really. We're tend to push more the blues and rock sometimes and whatnot. So just being able to see so many people into folk music and supporting that music was so fantastic. And I think even one of the seminars was kind of working as a Black folk musician, finding gigs and kind of overcoming things. And I was just like, what? Not only are other people in this room with me, that look like me, that are striving for the same thing, but people are dedicated to taking the time. I think Allison Russell had sent in an interview, and she's, oh my God, she's one of my favorites. And it was just all around just so cool being able to be like, wow, I'm not alone in this. This is awesome.
That's big. That's really big. So shifting gears a little bit, you are one of the many musicians who has a day job, right? And except for, I feel like what's different about you is it's definitely not just a day job. It's a full-on career. You are a counselor. Is that the right word?
Counselor, therapist.
Yeah. Okay. And you work with young people, which is really cool. So you do this work that I'm sure fulfills you and is very challenging and is, as I said, a career, right? Yeah. But I think what's cool or interesting to me is that from an outside perspective, I think there are probably a lot of folks who would just assume that you are a full-time working musician. So you're doing a really good job of sort of, presenting that. But I'm curious if that is a goal, if becoming a full-time musician is a goal, or if you're like, no, I like this duality of my life. And that's always going to be something that I balance.
Well, yes and no.
Okay.
It's one of those things, I've always known that, therapy is always going to be a part of my life. You know, that being said,
Mine too.
Yeah,
but in a different way.
Yeah. Everyone should be in therapy.
Everyone.
But, you know, like I've always felt that like if one day like someone came to me and they're just like, yep, we're funding like your musician's life, no worries, I'd be like, yes, I'm going to go do that for a while.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. That being said, I would probably keep on some clients because I do really much consider it is a day job. I mean, that I do it during the day, you know, in all the definitions. Right. And there will be many a time where like I'll work during the day and play during the night. Yeah. And that doesn't feel like a struggle for me. Okay. Because it's such, you know, music is such a release. It's like it's so tied into it that it doesn't feel like, oh no, I'm like having to, you know, sacrifice one thing or another, though sometimes there's schedule conflicts. But, you know, and the thing about music is that, like, yes, you can do it forever, but I feel like there is going to be a finite amount of time that I'm going to want to go on these long tours. Like, there's going to be, you know, I'm a pretty big of a little bit of a homebody. Yeah. Pretty big homebody. And I like my comforts. And, you know, the older I get, the more comforts I want. So, you know, I know that I can be a therapist at any stage of my life.
So true. Yeah.
But, you know, the touring part and the, you know, partying part, like, that's not something I know I'm going to, you know, necessarily want to do that part of it forever. Yeah. I'll always make music. I'll always record. Yeah. But will I always go on like 60-day tours or want to do stuff like that? Probably not. Yeah. Like, I want a big old farm with a lot of pit bulls. So.
Okay. Yeah. That's the future plan then.
This is the future plan.
Rachel Maxann's pit bull farm.
Yes.
You heard it here first.
It's going to be amazing.
Okay, so we don't have a ton of time left, and I want to make sure that we get to this next question, because I feel like anytime I'm talking to a female artist, I want to get into what it's like to be a woman on the road, and particularly knowing that you've done solo tours where you're out there by yourself, but also when you're touring with the band. What are some of the precautions that you take? How do you keep yourself safe? How are you just generally thinking about? We just have to think about things differently, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And so, yeah, just how are you thinking about your own safety on the road, and what advice would you have for other women artists?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, that first initial tour, the initial solo tour, I'm like, you know, I very, 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 very much advise, you know, booking Airbnbs that, you know, you feel safe in and that are close to the venue. Because, you know, oftentimes it could be easier to get a seedy hotel. It'll be cheaper, whatever. But like your safety is worth it. Yeah. And I was constantly checking in with friends. Like, they knew my location. They knew what I was up to. Yeah. And, you know, to a certain degree, like, social media can be helpful with that too. Because, you know, you are posting your location. Absolutely. You are letting people know where you're, you know, what venue you're at, like who you're going to be with, who you're playing with. Like, so it's like, it's an added bonus to kind of that promotion. It's like, oh, okay, people know where I am. Yeah. So yeah, you know, just check in with people, like, you know, make sure you're in a safe area. Try not to linger too long. Definitely don't get drunk. Like, I mean, it seems obvious, but it's hard.
I don't think it is obvious, though. Yeah. I mean, you know, when you're drunk, you're not as able to. And frankly, I think for a lot of us, too, we don't even have to be drunk. But just a couple of drinks and you're just not as alert, maybe, or as aware as you would be otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it's hard because, you know, oftentimes you'll be in a venue and the bands are super welcoming and be like, yeah, like, have some drinks with us. And, you know, like, they don't really think about the fact that, you know, you're there alone and they're just, you know, going back home to wherever they are. So, you know, you got to say no sometimes. Yeah. Like, even though it seemed like a fun opportunity, you have your one drink, you say your goodbyes and get home safe. It's much more important.
That is the most important thing, for sure.
And then more recently, I always have my pit bull with me. So go get
there. You go, from Rachel Maxann's pit bull farm. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
It's always so much fun to talk to you. I'm so excited about all the things that you have, you know, coming up in 2024. And yeah, I guess before we go, any just like one sentence, final piece of advice for artists out there getting ready to plan their first tour. What do you wish you knew?
It's worth getting the guarantee. Like some venues will not want to do a contract. They will not want to tell you a number. It is worth pushing for the guarantee and having the guarantee, or just not playing there and finding somewhere else. Because it's better to like know you'll have the money, know you'll have the place to play, than show up somewhere and it just falls apart. So always get that guarantee, whether it be email, text, contract, whatever. Get the guarantee.
And get it in writing.
Get it in writing.
There we go. Rachel, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
This
Thank you
has
for
been
having
awesome.
me.
And RachelMaxann.com is where you want to go to find Rachel on in all the places and find her music. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Yay.
We're done. Thank you so much.